All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the Sanders-Warren interplay. Now, there was an article the other day. I can't remember which news service released it. I remember reading it briefly and chuckling at it because it was wrong. It was a claim that Elizabeth Warren was slowly, beating away at Bernie Sanders' support and inching her way up against him. But actually, we can disprove that visually. We can objectively disprove it when we look at the RCP polling aggregates for the Democratic primaries. It isn't Elizabeth Warren that's got an interplay with Sanders polling-wise, it's Joe Biden. When Biden's rising, Sanders falls by almost the same exact amount and vice versa. This, by the way, lends credence to my belief that Biden will be the nominee unless something significant changes. Let me tell you why. Because if you assume that Sanders loses a couple states, if he loses New Hampshire, he's dead in the water, his support will begin to erode, and this shows me that a lot of it at least goes to Joe Biden. Now let's say that Sanders drops out. Biden rises reliably to 40%. He doesn't have 50% of the vote, but it doesn't matter. Nobody else is going to have anywhere near his total. It'd take any two of the other candidates just to sort of equal him situationally state by state. So other than a handful of technically viable individuals in their own home states, like Warren maybe taking a Massachusetts late in the game, it really wouldn't matter. But there is an interplay between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren that is worth exploring, and that's the fact that our link in the description to an archived article, it's 80% correct, I would say. Their platforms are very fundamentally similar, but here's the thing. If you look at their fan bases, they fucking hate each other. The Warrenites are a lot like the Clintonians, and they look at Bernie Sanders, you gotta understand, they don't hate him for his ideology. He's been, far left since the 60s. It's about electability. They think that Sanders is number one, he's almost a decade older than Warren, I think, or half a decade. He's too old. Some of them say, well, he's a fucking white male, basically, and I can understand why some Democrats would be nervous about having a white male candidate because they think, and not entirely wrongfully so, that it'll fail to energize certain blocks of the party that are necessary to get elected. And I don't think that they're wrong. I don't think they're completely right. I think that they can potentially win with that, and I think it's regrettable that there are so many Democrats that are racist and sexist against white males. But, there are some people that are. There are some people in the party that are like the BLM fringe, the pink-haired social justice warriors. They literally want the extinction of the white male species, so it's interesting to think of. But the interplay is this. The Warren and Sanders fans can't possibly dislike one another for political reasons related to their platforms. Their platforms are basically exactly the same. So therefore, I think it boils down mainly to electability. The Bernie Sanders fans say Elizabeth Warren can't win because she lied about her ethnicity, number one. That is a big one. She's gotten called out by Charlemagne the God and all these other people, the original Rachel Dolezal. That would become a problem, especially on a debate stage with Trump. He's going to rip her to pieces, is what they would say. And I happen to agree with them, by the way. They would say that she's inauthentic, she's phony, basically. She has taken up 90% of Sanders' beliefs, but she didn't have them. Like a decade ago, she wasn't fighting for any of them. That is, that she's just doing it for opportunistic reasons. I agree with that also. The Warren fans would look over and say Bernie Sanders is too old, which is also true. I agree with them. He's going to be 80 on election day, almost. So he's too old, number one. Number two, he's so unabashedly socialistic. Like he uses the wrong words and stuff. He's actually too far fringe. Like they would look at the handful of things Warren differentiates herself from him on, and they would say that's because she's the voice of reason in the room. She's a leftist who understands pragmatism, basically. So he's too old. He's not pragmatic. He's more idealistic. And also he gets kind of fiery and feisty, and that's true. Now, ultimately, if I'm a Democrat, let's say that I'm a Democrat just obsessed with winning, and it's going to be Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, which one do I think would fare better against Trump? I would have to say Sanders, ultimately. I don't think either of them can win. But if I was more pragmatic, like if I was obsessed with electability but wanted someone on the far left, like I wasn't a Biden fan or something like that, or going for Buttigieg, yeah, I'd probably side with the Sanders crowd over the Warrenites, the Beddoes, and the Harrises. Those are the three main camps of the far left other than Sanders. He's got a lock on probably 15-20% of the Democrats right now. Sanders will probably be in till the end unless he gets slamma-jamma to New Hampshire, in which case I can see him dropping out after Super Tuesday. It could be that Biden does a clean sweep in such a crowded field. If everything else remains unchanged, I would expect Biden to sweep most of the Super Tuesday states and win possibly all 4 of the starting states. That is, the thing for Biden is he needs to get Iowa. He's got a shit ton of support there. Sanders does too. Sanders is hoping to steal Iowa, get enough momentum to then get New Hampshire. That probably gives Sanders the nomination, because then the electability issue boils down to Biden didn't win one of the first states. If he then goes on to lose South Carolina, it wouldn't even matter if Bernie Sanders won it. If Kamala Harris comes in and grabs it up last second or something, Biden's bye-bye. Biden probably knows this. If I could give him any advice, it would be put every available ounce of effort into Iowa and New Hampshire. If you can sweep those, you probably gain the other two and sweep Super Tuesday simply because of the electability thing. You've got the significant voting bloc that isn't entire. Some of the leftists, they are about electability too. They're worried that you can't do it. That starts to change if you win both of the first states. For Bernie Sanders, I would say put all your effort in New Hampshire and hold on tight and get 3 or 4 of those Super Tuesday states in hopes of keeping up a continuous question about electability with Biden. You get to debate him some more, get endorsements from the rest of the far left, try to convince Warren to drop out, and then Bernie Sanders probably becomes nominee. Yeah, he'd still pull it off. It is possible. But you have to look at this interplay too, because they're sharing votes. Although at the same time, there's also vote sharing between Biden and Sanders. It sort of depends on what day of the week you look at. And there is a huge amount of fluctuation in the polls. Like, things will sort of stabilize later on in the race once we sort of understand the trajectory of things, get a couple debates over with, maybe get a few states knocked out of the way. It'll become easier to tell what's going to happen. Right now, though, you have to look at sort of the characteristics of the candidates and the voting blocks that they occupy or court. Like Warren and Sanders, they want leftist voters. Sanders wants sort of the working class Dems, like the Rust Belt Democrats. He wants to grab them up. Right now he's fighting Biden for that. Warren, on the other hand, she wants the feminist voters, some of the identity voters. It may be a smaller block, but it's one she can rely on more than Sanders, I think, with Rust Belt style voters. He's going to have a tough time going up against Biden, whereas Warren has an easier way forward. If she can smash Harris out of the way, she probably grabs most of her votes. That would bring her almost even with Bernie Sanders. I've seen so many people, I pay attention to left-wing Twitter and left-wing YouTube because, you've got to. When you're in this particular line of work, you need to take the pulse of people that you disagree with. It's sort of like when I talk to people on the alt-right. Well, you still need to know what they're thinking and what's happening at the time for political reasons. If you're going to do analysis, news reporting, whatever. When I look at them, there's a huge, stark fucking difference between the Sanders fans and some overlap with Beto, I would say, on that end, and the Warren-Harris fans. Like you can see some of the commentators there, I won't name names, but like they bitterly hate the other people. They're like, well, Bernie 2020, he can do it, he can beat Trump. You've got to be fucking insane to want to nominate Warren. You've got to be crazy to want to nominate Biden or something. You see some of these Biden, Democrats that basically like, well, I'd vote for Trump except, reasons, so, I've got a D after my name now. And they think that Bernie Sanders will collapse the party, and they think Kamala Harris is a nut. You talk to, like, Harris or Warren fans, they think, like, Biden and Sanders, they're fucking white male, and that's terrible, and that's not the future, so they should get out of the way and let the ladies take over sometimes. Now, it's a very, very interesting slew of characters that you've got, but the thing is, half of the people in the race are basically ignored, and some undeservedly. Like, Gabbard has gotten shafted. She makes the same kind of appearances. She has that appeal. I think she would do very well if she could actually get a news report on her, so to speak. Maybe she should start getting some of the prominent YouTubers to have her aboard on their channels and stuff. That'd be funny. She'd probably gain more support if she did that. It would be interesting if a mainline candidate from a mainline party nonetheless went the route of like, a Sargon-style UKIP campaign and started utilizing the power of technology. Trump kind of had a fusion campaign that was based on this, by the way, although it was other people unofficially doing stuff for him in mimetic form because he's, the meme master. Gabbard could maybe pull something like that off. She could probably rise up to the top quarter of the candidates, stick it in, develop sort of that organic infrastructure, and then later when she's not, in her fucking 30s, she probably would be a fucking formidable character. Looking forward to 2024 or 2028 or something, she would be quite powerful, I think, by that point. If she can get the Democrats to stop shooting themselves in the foot and adopt a platform that makes sense. I think Gabbard's plans are more sensible than some. Still wouldn't vote for her probably, but she's sane. That's more than you can say for maybe a Sanders. That's about all. Peace out.